Yeah, Bob's got a good technical question there that I'm sure once people begin to kind of understand the technical aspect of the calculate setting by NinjaTrader. Yes, what Bob's asking about here is if we go into the strategy window, right, when you add either an indicator or a strategy to your chart, there is in the setup section here, right? So the setup section is from the setup section down, those are all NinjaTrader settings, right? So BlackBird does not add any of these options here, any of these what are called properties, right? So everything from the setup section down, all those properties are NinjaTrader properties. They do not come from BlackBird here. Let me open up these others. So anyways, Bob's asking about the calculate property here from NinjaTrader. So if it's set to on bar close, yeah, are the stop loss trailing, and I'll just modify the question to, are the trailing actions also on bar close? And no, they are not. They can run in real time if your actions utilize real-time inputs. So so it's seemingly a technical answer to a technical question here. So now the question becomes, okay, what is a real-time input, right? So let's take a quick look at that. So all right, let's pull up a typical trailing stop loss here. So I will use the 10 tick trailing with a break even +1 here. I'll just pull that up for example. All right, and then let's go into the trailing actions, right? So there's two components here: the triggers or the actions that can use real-time inputs or calculated inputs. Let's just say. So, for example, an indicator would be a calculated input, right? So if you're using, if you're trailing your, let's take this 10 tick trailing right here, right? So this 10 tick trailing is basically, right, it's following the last price of the market, right? Minus 10 ticks, right? And so, the market price is a real-time input, right? The market's always moving up and down every split second there. Now, if we change this over to an indicator value, and let's say we want to trail, the Lizard Trader's super trend indicator. So let's switch this over to the super trend there, right? So an indicator is a calculated input, right? NinjaTrader has to go and run or calculate that indicator, find its value, and then return its value to BlackBird. So if you're using a calculated input, then NinjaTrader is going to wait for the bar to close. Assuming that your calculate, right? Again, assuming we got to back up here, right? So assuming that the calculate setting here is on bar close, right? So for indicators, so when you're using indicators as an input, then BlackBird has to wait for whatever that calculate is set to before BlackBird will receive a value from your indicator, right? So so if you're trailing using an indicator, then your trailing is only going to occur when the bar closes, because BlackBird has to wait for the bar to close before NinjaTrader will calculate that indicator, right? So pretty much, I guess the standard, a common way of thinking of what's a real-time input versus what's a calculated input. Basically, simply put, indicator values are a calculated input. Price is a real-time input. And yeah, so indicator values, and of course the price point prices, that's a calculated input, right, from the swing highs and lows indicator. And of course the linear regression channel, that's an indicator as well, right? So yeah, so there you go. Now of course, if BlackBird is running with its calculation set to on price change, then NinjaTrader is updating all your indicators. I'm sorry, I'll switch this over, right? Then that means NinjaTrader is running or calculating all of the indicators used inside of BlackBird with that same calculation setting, right? So, again, going back to the strategy window, right? All indicators running inside of BlackBird must adhere to whatever calculate setting that the strategy is running by. So that's what NinjaTrader does. There's no way to mix and match the calculate settings, unfortunately. So if BlackBird is set to on price change, then that means all the indicators running in BlackBird are also running on price change. Or if the calculator is set to on each tick, then all the indicators that BlackBird is using are also being calculated by using the on each tick calculate setting there. So, all right, Bob. So that about sums it up there. Yeah. So this basic. Let me just replace it here. So yeah. So these top basic trailing stop losses, right? The 10 tick trailing, the 10 tick with a break even, or the ATR trailing, right? Those are all using, well, actually, yeah, you know what? This pulls up a good point. This is a slight exception here with the ATR, right? The ATR is an indicator, but yeah, it is an indicator. However, let's open this up. So because the parent input is actually the last price of the market, right? So yeah, so this is the primary input, is the last price of the market. So that is coming in real time. The offset, so the ATR is being used to calculate an offset. So the ATR is not being calculated in real time. The ATR is being calculated using on bar close. So as the bar is forming, so let's say you're using a 10-minute bar, the ATR value from the last closed 10-minute bar, that ATR value is being used the entire time that the forming 10-minute bar is moving up and down, right? So in other words, so this 1.5 ATR is using the ATR value from the closed bar. So this ATR is still adhering to the calculate setting, but the trailing offset price is being calculated in real time because the primary input is the market price here. Right? So yeah, we kind of have a bit of a mixed bag here, but what counts is what is the primary input there. All right. So so now I guess taking this a little further here, the parabolic SAR, if we click on that one, and then if we go and inspect it, so on the trailing actions page here, the action, right, there is no trigger here, so but the action, if we take a look at the action, right, the action, its mode is set to indicator value, so the primary input is an indicator, so therefore this trailing stop loss is trailing based on the calculate setting. So in other words, since BlackBird is running on bar close, the parabolic SAR is only being calculated when the bar closes. So your stop loss trailing is only going to occur once per bar, right, after the bar closes there. Now, I didn't touch on the triggers here. So if you have a trigger rule, right, so we have a couple of them, right? We have an indicator value, and then there's price versus indicator, and there's also, let's see, trade signal trigger, right? The trade signal trigger, that uses your bloodhound signals, and then there's bloodhound signals, right? So let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. 3, 4. Yeah, so there's 4 triggers here that, well, actually even the delay might as well. It depends on how you use the delay, right? The delay can count bars, but the delay can also monitor, market movement in ticks, right? Ticks of market movement as well. So the delay is kind of has one leg in each world, right? 1 foot in each world there. But really we have 4 triggers here that, actually 3.5. So again, the price versus indicator, input A could be price, and input B can be changed to price as well, right? So for the price versus indicator, that could be price versus price, which, let's see here, if it's price versus price, then that could be in real time. That could be calculated in real time here. But the others, so the indicator value, right? Obviously the primary input is only an indicator. So that's gonna, so if you're using the indicator input or indicator value as your trigger, then that means your trailing rules can only update when the indicator gets updated, right? And again, the indicator gets updated based on BlackBird's calculate settings, right? So that's what you got to keep in mind is if you're using an indicator somewhere in your triggers, right? So we have input A is price. Let's say input A, you switch that over to the last price, but then input B is based on some indicator. Well, that indicator is only going to get it updated based on whatever the calculate setting is for BlackBird, right? So for right now, that's when the bar closes. So this trigger will only get updated when the indicator gets updated, which is when the bar closes, right? So, the same thing with Bloodhound, right? Bloodhound is just simply an indicator. So Bloodhound is only going to have the signals updated based on the calculate setting of BlackBird. And so that means, so right now, BlackBird is set to, if we look up here, right, this OBC means on bar close. So that's how you can tell what the calculate setting is for BlackBird, is it actually tells you in this little feedback, label here. Yeah, Ninja calls this the display label here. So the label tells you what the calculate setting is that you use for BlackBird. Right. So with on bar close, then of course Bloodhound's only being calculated when the bar closes as well. So, all right. So now I think we've basically run through every single scenario. So, actually, there's another third possibility here. So if you do have BlackBird running on price change, then you can reduce your trailing actions to only occur once per bar, right? But the way BlackBird is running right now, let's say, so our action is based on the parabolic SAR, so it's an indicator value. Now I can go into the repeat and I can modify this to say, look at, ticks of movement. However, that's not going to override NinjaTrader's requirements. So, this is not going to circumvent or override any of NinjaTrader's back-end functionality. Let's just call it that. Yeah. So, So NinjaTrader's backend functionality dictates that indicators only get updated on bar close. So even though you can set this in BlackBird, that's not going to override NinjaTrader's calculate setting. So, right. But if BlackBird is set to on price change or on each tick, then you can tell BlackBird, hey, wait until the bar closes before you calculate this trailing roll here. So you can reduce the amount of times, you can reduce the amount that trailing actions are being calculated, but you cannot increase the frequency. You can't increase the frequency at which trailing rolls are calculated, but you can always decrease the frequency. So, all right, now I think we covered every possible scenario there. So